we missing Marty?
There's Karen. No, Marty's here.
Marty's here.
Good evening, or good
And there's
afternoon.
Karen.
Oh, good.
Hi, Karen.
Hi there.
Hi, Karen.
How are you?
As well as can be
Fine.
expected under
Good
the
to see you.
circumstances.
Looks like
Okay.
it's sunny in Connecticut. It's pouring
Hey,
here.
we had a tornado warning here and a huge severe thunderstorm, but a tornado warning.
Where are you, Karen?
Northwest Connecticut.
Oh,
I think
Big
we are
storm.
on our Zoom for our
Okay.
meeting.
Go.
So I'm going to do the introduction here. Good evening, welcome. I'm Jean McKnight, Planning Board Chair. This open meeting of the Needham Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure there will be public participation unless required by law. This meeting will not have public comment. First, we'll confirm that a quorum of the members of the planning board are present. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Paul Alpert,
here.
Martin Jacobs,
Here.
Adam Block.
Here.
So we have a quorum of 4 members present, and our 5th member is not expected at this meeting.
Madam
Next,
Chair,
introduce-
Madam Chair, may I, just because I'm right in the middle of a big thunder and lightning storm here. Can I quickly make a motion that in case we have technical difficulties, that this meeting be postponed, although I don't know to when?
Lee, what do you say?
Lee's thinking.
Can I suggest an hour or two, in the sense that these storms will pass at some point, and I'd like to continue it and get it done tonight.
Okay, that's fine. We would just basically continue it off of this posted meeting, so I wouldn't need to repost it. So how about we make it 7 o'clock tonight? Oh, Paul has a conflict, I think.
I have a community preservation committee meeting. I don't expect it to last long because the purpose of the meeting is because we didn't take a vote on the Emery Grover warrant article, and I heard this afternoon that that the town is actually pulling that. So
Can we make it 8 o'clock instead of,
make it 8 o'clock?
because
Yes.
I couldn't make 7 anyway.
All right.
8 o'clock sounds good.
Well, let's have a motion to that effect, and also the technical difficulties of the chair motion.
I move that in the event of technical difficulties as a result of this storm or other factor, that we continue this hearing at 8 p.m. this evening.
This meeting.
This meeting, correction, not a hearing.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. And Mr. Block, do you agree to add to your motion? And if the chair should have technical difficulties, but what the meeting continues, that the vice chair shall act as chair temporarily?
Yes, until such time as the chair returns.
Yes.
And I
All right
second.
then.
Thank you.
And we have a second for that. So let's vote. Roll call. Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. So we're all set up with that possibility, postpone it to 8 p.m. And I want to introduce the planning department and other town staff who are present with us today. Director of Planning and Community Development, Lee Newman,
Present.
and housing coordinator. If I got that
It's
right.
fine.
Karen.
It's
All right.
fine.
Oh, community housing specialist, excuse me, it's right up there. Karen Sunerborg. And very happy
Present.
to have you with us, Karen.
Thank you.
And also from the planning department, Clay Hutchinson, who is providing us with technical support. You know, and of course, we know that others can see and hear us, and anything we share as state is a matter of public record. I do want to let the public know that our supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needhammass.gov, unless otherwise noted.
Needham,
And
Madam
all
Madam
votes-
Chair, Madam Chair, please, you said Needham, Mass. It's Needham, MA.
Oh,
Okay.
Needham, thank you for that correction. I'll say it again, the town's website, www.needhamma.gov. Thank you. And
Madam Chair?
all votes will be by roll call. Lee Newman, did you have a comment in?
I just want to alert people to the fact that there are two items we'll be discussing that are not part of the agenda package because they came in late this afternoon, but we'll do a revised agenda package that we'll post online. And that represents some email correspondence between a town meeting member, Mr. Frail, I think, who's suggesting an amendment, as well as an email from Barry Pollock that Chris Heap shared with me and asked to have his comments shared, because Mr. Pollock had asked to have his comments shared with the board. So those two pieces of correspondence, which I emailed you late this afternoon collectively, are also part of the conversation, but they're not in the agenda package yet.
So for in our agenda packet, and I'm not sure how that relates. Well, of course, it relates to the town meeting article that is the fiscal analysis memorandum for Highway Commercial 1 rezoning. Was that correct? Did I?
The correspondence that we got today relates to an additional motion to amend that's being offered by a town meeting member
Yes.
to address, I think, green energy building standards. And then just an email correspondence from Mr. Pollock regarding his proposed motion to amend.
So if the email dated April 13th to Carol Smith Bichetti, 2021 fiscal impact analysis is relevant to our agenda, it's just for background.
Yes.
I thought it was in our packet, but okay. So what the primary purpose for this meeting, because we didn't have it on our agenda for last night's meeting, and yet it is timely and something that we need to deal with, are amendments that people have proposed to Article 5 on the warrant for the annual town meeting for the rezoning of the so-called Muzzy site and Channel 5 site to a zone referred to as Highway Commercial 1. And we encourage anyone intending to propose an amendment to a zoning bylaw, and the moderator very much encourages this, to consult in advance with the planning board and, if necessary, with town council, so that we don't end up with something being voted by town meeting, which might then be turned away by the Attorney General because it's not lawful or the process wasn't followed right. So those proposing the articles in compliance with that directive from the moderator have submitted articles. They have been reviewed by town council. And so rather than leaving this, for something to try to do on the fly at town meeting, particularly with the COVID, the town meetings that we won't be sitting at a table together as usual. We've scheduled this meeting to discuss these proposed amendments and to decide what our position will be, what our recommendation will be to town meeting on each of these articles. So I thought I would present them in order of their having been provided to us. There are a total of 4 proposed amendments. The first 2 were provided by a newly formed organization in Needham called Equal Justice Needham, which has a housing working group. And I just want to disclose that I myself have been active in that housing working group. But I tried to stay out of this. I'm not advocating for the housing, the equal justice Needham in this regard. I tried to provide advice as far as careful wording, and that's all. So we have two proposed amendments by that group, and they both relate to affordable, to multifamily housing, affordable housing. Then the third proposed amendment is coming from a town meeting member named Barry Pollock. And he has been active in reacting to this zoning bylaw, as you know, has very strong opinions about it, and has come up with a proposed amendment, which goes to dimensional requirements of the bylaw. Then the fourth came to us just, I think, yesterday from, I believe he's a town meeting member, Stephen Frail, and that is focused on what I think he perceives as strengthening the part of the proposed zoning, the special permit criteria, and its mention of environmental, that the building should be environmentally sustainable, or words to that effect. And he wants to strengthen that particular provision. So starting with the First Amendment from Equal Justice Needham, and they sent along a 3-page statement supporting the zoning amendments, which I hope you've had an opportunity to read. The First Amendment is pretty simple. I'll read it. To amend the motion under Article 5 by deleting subsection 2 of section 3272 in parenthesis little m under item 2, which subsection 2 provides that no more than 240 dwelling units shall be permitted in the Highway Commercial 1 district, and then renumbering the subsequent sections. So what this would do is delete what's referred to as the cap. I think that this can be considered separately from Equal Justice Needham's other amendment, which has to do with affordable units. This has to do with the absolute number that will be allowed on this site of multifamily housing units, whether in a mixed-use development or in a standalone multifamily building. So shall we discuss, and then out of the discussion might emerge a motion regarding this proposed amendment? Mr. Halpert, do you have a comment?
No, I would like to hear from, Karen to see what, she's our community housing specialist. I'd like to get her take on this amendment. And then,
Yes, please. We're glad you're here, Karen, and I
have to excuse myself momentarily. I'll be listening from the other room.
okay. So on this idea that we have proposed a 240 unit cap, and this group wishes to amend it to remove the cap. What are your thoughts about that? I guess basically, do you think if we remove the cap, that would lead to a large demand for development of this site for multifamily housing or mixed use development with housing?
You know, on the face of it, it makes sense to me to just eliminate the cap. My understanding is that the 240 unit limit came from the mixed use overlay district. And there was a sense to put a number of units as a cap there. as opposed to, a percentage of developable space or of the actual square footage of what's created there. And then moving that 240 unit to this site does seem as a cap a little capricious, but as far as coming at a number. But, if there was some concern, I think the demand is probably for mixed use. I would doubt that you'd have a proposal for fully multifamily, but you potentially could.
Why do you say that, Karen?
Why do I say that you potentially could?
No, that we likely wouldn't.
One suggests that location is so much better oriented towards mixed use or commercial, based on the highway and Highland Ave, and it just seems compelling that a developer would look beyond just housing in order to maximize its profits. But I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, and
None of us do, and yet,
right.
with
Right.
your expertise, it does affirm the concept. Originally, I think that the vision for this was to facilitate mixed use as between office or lab and some level of retail, which we have substantially reduced.
Right.
But that there could potentially be mixed use as between residential and retail, or mixed use between lab, office, retail, and housing. The one scenario where I could see mixed use between the three segments is where lab space and the biotech or life science industry is really focused on development with three particular pillars simultaneously, which is a live, work, play model. So within the immediate vicinity, there is workforce housing, and workforce specifically here would relate to those that would occupy the lab space or the office space. And then there'd be the offices or labs where they would work, and some level of housing nearby. And but that's really the only kind of model where that might work, and I'm not sure there's enough capacity on this particular site, even though it's a little over 15 acres. With unless the Channel 5 building itself was demolished and rebuilt as part of a big development, which is totally possible and what we're making available. I don't know that would necessarily be achieved immediately, but the point is that, as you're saying, you're affirming that our original vision to have more commercially oriented uses for this site is a more likely result.
Right.
But Adam, are you suggesting that the 240 unit cap is not arbitrary, but is to achieve the kind of balance you spoke of between among uses?
More specifically, I think Marty called it out at a previous meeting that even the number 240 or so, even from 128, that it itself was, I guess, an arbitrary number. And yet, I don't think the town sees for this site an unlimited amount of housing, that some limit would be imposed, and that it's not entirely arbitrary, that that we are trying to find some kind of a balance between uses. So it's somewhere of a gray area, because I recognize what Marty says, And yet we're also trying to balance uses on the site. Is that fair, Marty?
Marty, do you wish to speak to this now?
Well, no, I think Adam's right. I think obviously you put any number out of thin air. It's too arbitrary to a degree, but the balance is what we have sought here. And, you know, at the same time I say all that, and I agree essentially with what Adam's saying, I always have to step back and say, I tend to be a market guy. I don't know what the market is going to favor here. I don't have a crystal ball either, Karen. For sure we don't.
Yeah.
And could some developer come along and feel that, you know, a lot of housing is the best way to go for that developer? Yeah, it's possible. And should we allow that to happen? And my propensity to go with the market, except for where we want to say no, 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 is pretty strong. So I'm torn, frankly.
I would just like to inform people that the 240 number that came out of the mixed use district was really derived, or the goal as it was being applied there was to come up with a number of units and a unit size mix that was going to minimize the impact on the school system in terms of school-age children that were actually in the development. So that 240 and the unit size mix was really designed to come up with a way to allow for housing to happen, and yet to be able to understand and not negatively impact school cost. And so that's where that number came from in mixed use in that district. And then it was just applied here on the Highway Commercial 1.
And Lee, that district would also service Elliott, correct, on an elementary basis?
Yes, I think, and that was the thought process was, you know, when it was initially proposed in mixed use as an overlay, you know, how many units could we accommodate? How do we minimize the impact on the schools to allow that to happen? And what is the balance there? That's how it was derived in mixed use 128.
I'm just going to comment briefly on Adam's comment about it being the Elliott School. As the student population changes, the town redistricts,
Right.
and spreads the school children out appropriately. So children wind up switching schools sometimes because of a shift in the school age population.
I understand that. That's good clarity.
Yeah.
Not something they like to do very often, but it can be done.
Yeah. Paul, do
Yep.
you have, hearing what Karen had to say, do you want to make a statement yourself?
Sure. So I'm going back to the big picture. And I'm thinking of how we started here, how we got to this point, and we're back to actually reconsidering where we want to go and how we envision this property. We started with the proposition that this is currently industrial zone. So we saw it as a commercial parcel. The original proposals that came to us from the
CEA.
The Council of Economic Advisors, and the community planning, the economic development advisor to the town, was to rezone the entire area along Gould Street from Highland Avenue all the way down to the park, which is all industrial, but to rezone it so that the industrial use, we would bring it into the 21st century, and to have a more pleasing aesthetic look to this industrial area. So originally we were saying no residential. This is not a residential area. We're rezoning a business area, an industrial area for more amenable, more 21st century business and industrial use. And at that time, we did get positive feedback from certain people in town. I'm thinking specifically of certain select board members who were concerned about having additional housing in town and the impact it would have on schools. So they were very much in favor of not having residential in this area and not increasing the residential base. When we started having community meetings, we did get feedback from the community that some people actually saw these sites as being shifted completely from industrial and business use to residential use. Their argument being, and to some extent it's a valid argument, this is really in a residential area. The rest of Gould Street, the other side of Gould Street, and then as you get past the park, is all residential. The other side of Highland Avenue, across the street, is residential. We should be seeing this more as residential than as business and industrial, and it would not have as great an impact in terms of traffic, in terms of noise for the existing residential neighborhood. I believe we tried to reach a compromise on that. To say, okay, we'll allow for residential, but we'll put a cap on it so that we take into account the objection about the potential impact on the schools, and because this is now an industrial use. So this is opening it up to become what could be residential. It could open it up to have the impact on the schools. I don't know whether we would then have pushback from the Board of Select, from the Select Board, where we've had the Select Board before being in favor of this zoning amendment that we were proposing. So, I raise all this to say, what do we want to see for this site? And I understand what Marty's saying. Let the marketplace decide. If it turns out that the marketplace says residential, let it be residential. If the marketplace says no residential, then it won't be residential. And we do have a large menu of permissible uses with all, I hate to use the phrase with all due respect. But your point, Adam, is you keep focusing in on research and development and
office.
We have a whole laundry list of potential uses other than residential and offices. I would not be surprised if we wind up getting an application to build a fitness center here or a skating rink. They're allowed uses. There seems to be some
It's all going to depend on
support
who
for that.
buys the property.
What's that?
All of that would depend obviously on who buys the property and what kind
Right,
of
well,
stuff
yeah,
they want to do. Exactly.
No, it's a question of the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right. What does the marketplace provide? It's very possible that we won't see research and development here, that we won't see office space here, that we'll see something else here. So I don't know. I'm ambivalent. I'm torn because we're moving so far away from the planning board's original vision of what to do, what we want to see on these parcels, and keeping in the back of our minds the rest of that side of Gould Street.
Yeah.
Okay, so who is going to speak next? Okay, Adam Block.
So I guess I would take a step back. I think that EJN has identified um, an absolute need in town when it comes to contributing towards more equitable housing programs. I think that it's a national crisis, and we're certainly caught up in it, and we're not alone in it. And I would like us to see, as a town, and in particular, through our executive responsibility and as as leaders in the town, to develop some form of equitable housing program that can be applied throughout the town. And I'm mindful that different districts in town may have different needs or characteristics, and yet, generally speaking, I don't think that we should that we can be expected to adequately develop an equitable housing program just for this site in isolation of the rest of the town. What Karen has identified, and Karen, you're a specialist, I think, in housing programs, and in particular affordable housing programs, you've reaffirmed our own conclusion that this site is generally driven more towards commercial. And Paul, I absolutely acknowledge that, north of Ellis, and certainly on the west side of Gould, there is a residential neighborhood. I don't support an unlimited amount of housing. We have, I think, a very good plan. I think our vision was a good vision. I think the ability to allow for housing in response to some constructive feedback from other members of the town, I think is a benefit to include it, but I don't think that it changes our overall vision for this site. So on that basis, while we are allowing for the use, I don't support eliminating the cap.
Madam Chair?
Yes, of course, Marty Jacobs.
So, I mean, it's a difficult conversation, but I'm going to make it very as concrete as I can from my point of view. And that's this. We have undertaken studies, various fiscal analyses, and a lot of discussion. We have never discussed the possibility of having no cap. With the, I should say, with the benefit of study. So as a very concrete example, if we didn't have any cap, does anybody have a real clear idea of how many residential units could be put on that site? I don't.
And I think Karen Sunneborg, in her response and advice, said it's really not clear. I mean, it's a very unlikely that somebody would devote the entire site to housing, but very hard to predict. I think, and Karen is nodding yes, essentially that's what she said. So, yeah.
So the problem is, if someone asks an elementary question of us, well, if you don't have a cap, how many could you have? What do we say? We don't know. We haven't studied it.
Right.
That's a problem. That's a big problem.
Well, it's outside the scope of the framework.
That's right.
So that's why we're proposing within the framework. I mean, the whole reason for this, right, was our goals, I think, have been pretty clear, although perhaps have not been clearly articulated. One was to improve the gateway, enhance it aesthetically. That's a subjective thing. Not everyone's going to agree, but that's one of their goals, a critical goal. The second goal, which is equally important, was to enable a greater level of public control over development, specifically so we could mitigate whatever the impact is in town. And which is why we're inducing as much by special permit as possible. And I think those goals remain valid. just as much as that's why we've developed the framework as we have. And it allows us to, if we see that someone's traffic study, based on whatever allowable mix is by use or special permit, is more than 9,000 trips a day, then obviously we're going to pare that down. It'll necessarily impact in a negative way the financial impact, but that's okay, because we have to make sure that we have capacity within our system and within our infrastructure. And if we don't, that's a problem. But I think our framework is a good framework, and I
Okay,
am staying with it.
are you all set then, Adam?
Yeah.
So if, unless any other member wishes to add, and of course you may after I speak, I would like also to my point of view. And I'm really inclined toward what Marty Jacobs said. We put so much care into the evaluation of what we proposed as the uses and the dimensionals on this site. We hired Judy Barrett to do the fiscal impact study in particular, and that's what I'm focusing on. We have confidence in that study. She's a very experienced planning professional. We have an idea of what the burden on the town will be of the different kinds of development proposed, and what the future tax income is from the various uses proposed. That also enabled us to say with confidence what the impact would be on our school system, and in particular on the Elliott School. The studies, the planning studies put out by the school committee and its consultant, picked the Elliott School in particular as one that's straining and just about at capacity, even though we know long-term there's an expectation of a decline in school-age population in our town. We do have this one school that is a concern. And although I think Marty, one of us said, well, we can always redistrict, that's not easily done. People are very wedded to the idea that I'm in this neighborhood and I'm in this school district. And I just felt so good about being able to say with confidence, or hear others say and agree with them, that 2 or 3 children per grade could be predicted in the Elliott School based on the number of housing units that would be permissible on this site. And I really feel that we have to stick with confidence with these fiscal impact reports as we go before town meeting. And we're certainly going to have a concern about effect on the schools. And I want to be able to say with confidence what the effect on the schools will be. So therefore, I am opposed to eliminating the cap. So any further comment before a motion presumably is made on this, one way or the other? Yes, Mr. Jacobs, I think you said you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think I was muted. I'm sorry. I would move that we oppose the removal of the cap.
I will second that motion.
Right, so we have a motion and a second to oppose removal of the cap. So is there further discussion before I call for a vote? Hearing none, I will call for the roll call vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Martin Jacobs,
Aye.
Adam Block,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. So the motion carries unanimously among the 4 that we are opposed to this amendment. This proposed amendment for the removal of the cap.
Madam Chair, I
No.
just want to mention now, I know it's early, but at 6:50, I am going to have to leave this meeting. I just want you to be aware. Okay.
Oh, and thank you. I think we'll do our best to move quickly here now. The Second Amendment presented by Equal Justice Needham has to do with various standards for affordable housing. Well, let's see if I can summarize it. What it essentially does, there are two different factors to it. In a home ownership project, that would be, likely a multifamily home ownership condominium project. The income of the household would be at the usual standard of annual gross incomes at or below 80% of area median income. So as far as the income eligibility goes, it would stay at 80% as we had it. However, what they do is add this. Those units must be priced for affordability to households having annual gross incomes of not more than 70% of AMI at the time of marketing. So the income of the household can't be more than 80%, but the various costs, the assumed repayment of the mortgage at a certain percentage of the purchase price, the monthly condo fee, the monthly utility charge, the monthly taxes on that unit would, the idea, especially in setting the price of the unit, would you try to take all those factors and make it so that the output, this household's expenses on housing would be set as if their income had been 70%. So perhaps it would be good. There's another aspect to this that's really quite different going to rental. But perhaps it would be good to stop here and please ask Karen Cernobroug to comment on this.
Yeah.
The proponents referred to it as providing a window of opportunity. And Karen, would you comment on this?
Absolutely. This is standard requirement from the state as part of the local initiative program guidelines. So if you're going to have a unit that's qualified for inclusion in the subsidized housing inventory, it has to meet a number of requirements. And one is, if it's a home ownership unit, it has to be initially priced based on the state's formula. And this is part of the state's formula. So this, without even being written in, this is just going to be required. When you do resales, basically, you're looking at the deed rider, and the deed rider specifies the formula for repricing the unit. But this is something that's standard across the board throughout the state that's required, that 70% marketing window. Because if you're going to price it at 80%, there are not going to be a lot of people who are going to, your ability to market the unit is severely restricted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they have that.
Thank you very much, Karen. Now, you mentioned a particular program that
LIP.
DHCD, the Local Initiative Program.
It's the LIP program.
Now, the Local Initiative Program I think of as being under General Laws Chapter 40B.
Mm-hmm.
So
there are two pieces for LIP program.
Mm-hmm.
One is, even if it's 40B, if the units are going to be priced as homeownership units, they have to use this 30% of 70% deal. The other one is called a local action unit. And these units that would come out of this particular project, if they were homeownership units, would be called local action units because they were created by a local action zoning mandate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So does that mean unless they were sold in accordance with this formula, they would not be countable as on our inventory of affordable units?
All of the marketing materials, all the units, everything would have to be approved by the state. the state would not approve anything unless it met these requirements, and they would not be included in the subsidized housing inventory.
May I, Madam Chair, in the interest of time, we
Yes,
don't have a lot of time and we have a lot to discuss. I would like to give my point of view now and lead to the motion, because my motion is going to be that we do not support it, but this is my point of view. My point of view is that I am very sympathetic to the goals stated by the proponent of this amendment. You have already started an analysis of the various residential areas of town, or various areas where we could have residential areas in town, and where we have affordable housing and where we don't have affordable housing in our bylaws, with the view towards changing our bylaws as a whole with regard to affordable housing. What I would like to see happen is that this amendment for this parcel is not adopted, that we don't do this parcel by parcel, but that in the very near future, right after town meeting, that a proposal be brought to us to re-examine our bylaws for the entire town and
Agreed.
rewrite our affordable housing bylaws. For one thing, as has been suggested by you, Madam Chair, to include all of the areas, all of the zoning districts in town that allow for housing, to have affordable housing written into all of those areas, and to examine these criteria and vet them and get recommendations by Karen and her knowledge, and to guide us to examine this on a town-wide basis. And again, I want to stress, I'm very sympathetic to the goals that are being outlined here. I'd like to see it done on a town-wide basis.
and Paul, does your comment go, although we haven't yet presented the change in rental units, does your comment go to the proposed change of the income caps for rental units?
Yes, my
That
suggestion is, my
also-
motion is, I'm going to make the motion that we not support this amendment. But I want to make it clear that I am inviting these proponents to come back to us to have us examine these proposals on a town-wide basis, because I think they are very much worthy of examination and being put into our bylaws town-wide.
All right, so
Second.
you're intending to make that motion. You
Oh,
haven't.
I've made, my motion is, I move that we not approve this amendment, that we not support this amendment.
Oh, okay, the entire amendment, both aspects of it.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so we
second
have that motion. At this time, do we have a second for that motion?
I will second that motion.
All right. Now, I assume that we do want to have some further discussion of this. I do have one quick question for Karen. I just want to make sure I understand. Even though, suppose that this, the motion that we're against passes, and it doesn't, it's not approved by town meeting, would that 70% standard, would we apply that at the time we're reviewing a particular project? Because it's what would be required by the state anyway, so that the units would be countable in the inventory. Is that correct, Karen?
Yeah, I don't know why they even added this 70%, because if it's going to be an affordable unit, it's going to have to be, sold based on that formula. So
Okay.
they added, I think, another layer of confusion that, yeah, any home ownership, the unit that you're going to want to have that's new and is going to be counted in the SHI has to follow the state guidelines and part of the guidelines is this way of calculating purchase prices.
Okay, all right, so now I want to just wanted to make sure that was very clear. And I would like to give, so we have a motion, we have a second, opportunity for further discussion. Mr. Jacobs, do you wish to?
Not for me. I agree with Paul and Paul's reasoning and his support of a townwide adoption of such a thing, but not now and not with this project alone.
Okay, Mr. Block, your comment.
That's exactly what I was saying earlier. I completely laud the goals. I agree with my colleagues Marty and Paul, and have no further comment at this time. And look forward, though, to welcoming EJN into a meeting to discuss some of the parameters that we can start studying how to create more equitable housing relief throughout the whole of the town.
All right, then, I, as was mentioned, had already kind of taken this on as a project to examine all of our zoning districts and first focusing on those that allow multifamily housing but don't have an affordability requirement, and then also some districts where we should allow multifamily housing. Well, we might want to. We certainly should study it, with every expectation that we will seriously do that in the coming year, starting in September, and with the goal of bringing something before town meeting next year. And I think our planning department is committed to that, to working on that. And I hear that the members of the planning board are saying today that they do want to move forward with that study. And so with regard to the substance of the proposed amendments, I'm not personally opposed to the idea of changing the rental from 80% to an average of 65%. It might be something that we definitely want to consider in our other districts. And I understand that the 70% applies anyway. It's not something we need to put in our bylaw. So with that commitment, I like very much working with Equal Justice Needham and its housing group, and I hope to continue working with that group. But with that commitment, if there are no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on the proposal not to support this amendment. So, Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye, and thank you very much, Karen.
and the chair is aye. So we're unanimous in opposition to that amendment regarding affordability. So now we have the amendment proposed by Barry Pollock. I wonder if, rather than relying on me to try to summarize, I would actually like to turn to Adam Block or to Lee Newman, who have been following this very closely and perhaps will do a better job of summarizing these proposed changes than I would. Who would like to pick that up?
I can take a stab, and Lee, if I miss something, you might be able to correct me. But I think it's fairly simple. I'll take a step back. Throughout this process, over the last several months, there have been a number of different motions to amend, in particular the last several weeks, that this particular town meeting member has presented. and they have continued to change at predominantly at every instance. And he, in his communication to town council, continues to reserve the right to make additional changes based on additional conversations that he has, which is obviously his prerogative. The latest motion to amend from him effectively increases the open space requirement from 25% to 30%. And just as a reminder, our original proposal earlier this year was open space requirement of 20% that we increased to 25. And then his second point is to reduce the floor area ratio, the principal floor area ratio to 0.8 by special permit, with an additional, there's some echo here. Can you hear me okay? Do you hear an echo?
No?
I
Not
heard
now.
a scratching sound, but it's gone away, hasn't it?
Okay.
Hmm.
So, so he guess, I guess you could say he has a base FAR of 0.8 with an addition of 0.3 FAR that gets us to a total of 1.1 FAR, where that 0.3 FAR is split between housing and then some kind of an indoor athletic center, a rec center of some kind, or a skating rink, etc. So those particular uses are not that defined in terms of the rec center because they're encompassing multiple different types of uses. And yet the point is he's looking to reduce the FAR from 1.35 to 0.8 and to have an additional 0.3 split between housing and rec center. I think that's a fair summary.
So there could be a maximum by special permit FAR of 1.1. Is that
For
correct?
very limited uses,
For very limited uses.
for
yes.
very limited uses.
Provided the extra square footage was for those uses.
And he's only adding a 0.1 FAR from the as of right 0.7 to the special permit 0.8 for all other uses of our menu of uses that could go into this property.
Which, to speak to that one particular point, where our goal is to enhance public control over development, which would be through inducing through special permit, a developer that's choosing a use that between 0.7 and 0.8, to go through a special permit, they're not, we're going to miss the goal. We're not going to achieve the goal. We're not going to be able to have much control over any kind of development, which I think is the antithesis of what they're ultimately looking for, because they want to make sure that we don't have a terrible development that overpowers the area.
Can I just ask for a clarification? Because I'm a little confused. I'm looking at this Article 5 motion to amend. It indicates the 30%, which I understand. But then it indicates that the 1.35 is being replaced by a 0.95. And that's by special permit, so you can go to a 0.95. And then on top of that sits, I think the 0.35, which brings you up to a 1.3, and that's for housing. Then I thought then a 0.15 for the athletic facility, which brought you up to the 1.35. Am I misinterpreting this?
I think what you're looking at is out of date with his current proposal.
Okay,
So
I'm
that was the case from a previous motion that he had. He's subsequently revised it, and the latest proposal.
okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. I'm sorry.
Based on the emails that I have, which go back, I think, to yesterday, and the attachment from yesterday is what I'm looking at.
Adam, I'm looking at an email from Mr. Pollock, April 20th at 7:17 a.m. Is
Correct.
that most up to date?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one.
Okay.
Yeah, but perhaps it would help to actually read. Let me make an effort. So the FAR that we had proposed, the maximum FAR, which would require a special permit, was 1.35. But he would insert in place the number 0.95.
No, wrong. Madam Chair, that's the wrong motion. May I?
Deleting the number 1.35 and inserting in place the number 0.95.
No, Madam Chair, that's wrong.
I
May I?
believe I'm reading from the very latest thing that he sent.
Well, I guess one of us is right and one of us is wrong, but from the email that I have that Lee sent us from yesterday from Mr. Pollock says, Article 5, move that the main motion under Article 5 be amended by deleting the number 1, deleting the number 25% in paragraph 5, specifically in the first sentence, 4.11.14, and inserting in its place the number 30%. This relates to the open space. Point number 2, deleting the number 1.35 in paragraph 5 in the first sentence of 4.11.15 and inserting in place thereof the number 0.8 and inserting at the end of the paragraph 2 new sentences stating, quote, to encourage mixed-use development by special permit, the planning board may allow an increase in the floor area ratio of an additional 0.3 totaling 1.1, with the additional 0.3 floor area ratio comprised solely of up to 0.15 floor area ratio devoted to dwelling units and up to 0.15 floor area ratio devoted to the indoor athletic / exercise / fitness or skating rink uses. In granting a special permit for indoor athletic, exercise, fitness, or skating uses, the planning board shall consider whether a substantial portion of such uses will benefit Needham students and support or supplement school programs. That I understand is the latest motion that was attached to an email yesterday.
Yes, that's correct. I just checked my emails.
All right. Well, I do apologize. I really did make an effort to pull out what I thought was the latest version.
I understand.
And I read from not from the latest version, and I don't actually have the latest version in front of me. So I rely on others to say what's in it.
So that's as I outlined. One technical confusing part to it is he's saying that to encourage mixed-use development, by special permit, the planning board may allow an increase in the floor area ratio of 0.3. Could that be interpreted to say that his 0.8 is by right? And that he's effectively increasing the by right FAR from 0.7 to 0.8?
Well, on his language doesn't do that. I mean, the language of the bylaw says the as of right is a 0.7, and then he's amending the section which
special
deals
permit.
with the special permit and making the 1.35 a 0.08. So that's what the language of the bylaw calls for.
That's why I thought it was strange to say by special permit, the planning board may allow the additional 0.3 because anything over 0.7 is a special permit anyways. But regardless, the point is that he's proposing that the base floor area ratio by special permit be 0.10 greater than the by right FAR. Personally, I think that as a result, I would oppose that motion in its current form because there's not enough of an inducement to move towards a special permit. And therefore, the only controls we would have would be at a diminished amount by a major site plan special permit review when we would lack the other discretionary powers bestowed upon us by a full special permit.
Mhm.
And also, I'd also want to point out to those that are watching that although we're proposing a maximum floor area ratio of 1.35, it's not something that we're going to give up and that we're going to give into that easily, especially given the challenges that we've had throughout on this, and the town has raised some very worthy points of that should influence our decision in allowing and approving a special permit. So just because we're creating the framework, or that we're identifying the ball field for the game, doesn't mean that that we have to allow that the extent. So that's all I would say, and therefore I move to oppose this motion.
We'll second that motion.
All right, is there further discussion? Mr. Alpert, any further discussion on your part?
No,
Mhm. Mr. Jacobs?
No,
All right. And I did find the correct final version. I had thrown it in the trash and wrote on it prior version. So here it is in front of me. Is it, and everybody, so I assume everybody is clear, and now I am clear on exactly what is being proposed, that the motion is to oppose.
I do want to make one comment,
Mhm.
which is that I regret that Mr. Pollock did not separate this into two motions, one dealing with the green space and one dealing with the FAR. But it's one motion. We have to deal with it as one motion, and so I oppose it. I would have had more sympathy for the increase of the green space to 30% and would have seriously considered voting in favor of that. But where it's a combined motion, I oppose the amendment.
Um, all right, well, that is, of course, what's before us.
That's right.
It seems as though we could, however, after we deal with this motion, propose another motion that we,
No,
no, we're not
Pollock-
gonna, we're
Mr.
not gonna
Pollock is
respond
making
to
amendments.
hypotheticals,
Mr.
all
Pollock
right?
is making amendments. He is free to do what he is free to do.
And we're
Okay.
also going to lose Marty in 12 minutes.
All right,
So the
so,
motion's on the floor.
all right, so it's time to call for a vote. Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
aye,
Mr. Block,
Aye.
and the chair is aye, so that is for unanimous vote of the four in opposition of Mr. Pollock's motion. So then the next is a motion that an amendment, a proposed amendment that just came into us, I think, yesterday.
Well, it came in
Yeah.
today, actually. It's been changed. I think the latest version came
Oh,
in at
yes, the latest
4:38
version,
today.
right. It came in from,
I
Stephen.
forwarded to you at 4:53.
I have it, where is it? I really did think I was well organized here. But now I'm having a hard time finding,
Okay, in the interest of time, Madam Chair, I have a motion to make.
yeah,
Considering the fact that we got this at such a late time, we really have not had time to consider it. I understand what Mr. Friel is saying. I don't really know which way I want to go on this yet because I haven't had enough time to consider it. We generally do have meetings prior to town meeting. And I make the motion that at this time, we take no position. And if we change our minds and want to discuss this at a subsequent meeting before town meeting, we can make a recommendation on floor of town meeting.
I will second that motion.
all right, so we have a motion to take no action on Mr. Frail's proposed motion to amend. And is there further discussion of that motion to take no action? Hearing none, I call for a vote. Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. So we vote unanimously to take no action at this time on Mr. Frail's proposed amendment. That with the possibility that we may take it up if we have a subsequent meeting prior to town meeting. Presently, we do not have a meeting scheduled. Our
Madam
next
Chair,
meeting that we have scheduled is May 18th.
Madam Chair, I just want to remind the board that we have been invited to go in front of the select board next week, Tuesday. So if it was felt appropriate, once I understand what their schedule is, we could schedule a board meeting to take this up if you wished, either probably prior to our presentation to the select board.
What time are we supposed to be at the select board meeting?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I have no confirmation from them, but we
Do they
could.
want, are they inviting all of us, or do they just
Yes,
want?
I think I've reached out to all of you, and I think the plan is for all four of us to go, for all four board members to go.
I assume it's by Zoom?
Yes,
And so you will be posting this as a planning board meeting.
so I would post a meeting as a planning board meeting, maybe prior to our going there, and then we would have our Zoom meeting, and I would time it so then we could finish our business and then, log off and then go to their meeting, because we would already be getting together that night.
In any event, we would be posting it as a planning board meeting.
That's correct.
It's just that we'd be operating first on one Zoom link and then on a different Zoom link. Is that
Well,
correct?
we would be going into the selectmen's posted meeting for their meeting.
Is that so we can consider Mr. Frail's motion?
Yes, the planning board meeting. I'm just suggesting that if we're already going to the select board that night, maybe a half hour before we're scheduled to go to that meeting, I post a planning board meeting. It allows you to take up any business at that point. We take care of that business and then we adjourn, and then we go over and join the selectmen's meeting on their agenda.
That's fun.
I would just request that the first meeting to consider Mr. Frail's motion be scheduled for no earlier than 7 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was going to say that if the planning board wants us at their meeting at 7 o'clock or 7:30, that we handle this after.
Okay, well, let's just wait and see what their schedule is, and then I can make an informed choice.
Right. And I'm sorry, I had simply left the materials on my desk instead of in front of me. But we've made a decision and we are limited in time tonight to put this off, so we will.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Block.
I've an unrelated to town meeting question. I just wanted to double check that last night, when we voted to close the hearing for 100 West Street, the LCB senior housing project, do we need to do anything further, Lee, for you to begin preparing the decision, or do you prepare it in rough form and then we deliberate, or do you have to wait to start the decision until we deliberate?
It really depends. In projects where I think I understand what your intentions are and where you're going, I don't necessarily need to have that conversation ahead of time, although it's helpful. I think in the context of this project, we've had so many meetings on it with the zoning before town meeting and then the presentation last night. I think I understand the framework to put something successfully together for you. I was going to essentially model this over a traditional redevelopment project that we would have with the standard conditions that we impose there. and then fold in the kinds of conditions we impose on the affordable units and we have in our mixed use developments. And I was going to look at the base permit that was issued to the prior user of the facility to look at some of the operational conditions that we had embedded there to make some decisions about what seemed appropriate to carry forward or what adjustments should be made, because that permit was written 15 years ago. So I think if you're comfortable, I'm comfortable putting together the framework.
I would say proceed.
Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to mention for, really for Lee, I suppose, more than anybody, at the actual town meeting, I will be available by phone, by Zoom, by FaceTime. I will not be able to be there in person. So for planning purposes, Lee, whatever you have to put together, as we've done with prior meetings, that's the way I'm going to have to proceed on this.
Okay.
Well, we customarily, and I expect we will, Lee, won't we call a planning board meeting? Just that for the time frame just before?
Yes,
The-
we've done that. We did that in the past when people were still in their homes. We had a Zoom meeting. And I think then you guys left and went to the actual location. That's how we did it.
That's how we
last
did
time.
it before, a year ago. Yeah.
Right. So I
Yeah.
think we had a Zoom meeting before, earlier, couple hours before that. And then you left and went actually to the location.
Are all the things that we're concerned with, including our budgetary special, the article to appropriate funds for consultants, all on the annual?
No, they're on the special. So they're on different warrants.
Is there any need for us to have a meeting prior to both the special and the annual, or only the annual?
I would say we should put something on the calendar for both so that we're covered the way we always do. And even if we only meet for a short period of time, we have it covered. We have a meeting, so in case something surfaces that requires action, we're covered. So normally if we're doing a normal meeting, I post a meeting before every night of town meeting. So we'll plan on doing it for the specials too. I'll send you some suggested times and put together a calendar.
All right, because it's almost time to post those the next week.
Yep. Well, it's actually,
Right, so are we all set
actually
on
posting.
our agenda for this meeting? Is there anything further the planning director wishes to report on, or any member wishes to bring up?
I just want to say that I had some communication with George Genta today, and he's actually posted his video, or at least it's up for the citizens petition article. And Jean and I are going to be working tomorrow on her presentation that she's going to do, which is on the consulting monies, funds for planning consulting fees, and the planning board's recommendation on the citizens petition article. So we'll be getting that done tomorrow.
Thank you all for accommodating my need to leave right now. So I
Move
don't
we
think,
adjourn.
I'm sorry?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Moved in second to adjourn. All right, call for the vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Martin Jacobs,
Aye.
Adam Block,
Hi.
and the chair is aye, so we stand adjourned.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good
Do
night.
you want to connect at around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? Does that work for you?
Yes, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, yes. Friday morning is
Yeah,
busy.
so I'll do a